All right, finally, Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier is happening next Saturday, July 7th at UFC 226. Let's break down this fight. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Fight Scene. On this channel, we break down things that are happening in the world of MMA and combat sports. My name's Drew, and finally, today, I want to talk about the fight that's happening between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic at UFC 226. Look, I've tried to put out this video like 100 times, and I've also procrastinated it for like 3 months easily. When I first made this channel, they announced this fight that was happening at heavyweight for the belt, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to put this video up as soon as possible. The challenge was I just kept changing my mind about who I thought was going to win, and I've been mulling this over and thinking about it and listening to other podcasts, and just over and over I've been thinking and thinking about this fight, and I can never make up my mind, so I kept procrastinating it and putting it off. Then I finally go to make the video. I get my wisdom tooth yanked out. I can't talk for like a week. Construction's happening up the road, so the audio was all weird. I go to film it last night. My camera battery dies. My camera's been doing weird things all day. It's like I've been doomed to make this video, but we got 1 week left, and I'm determined to get this video out there. Daniel Cormier versus Stipe Miocic at UFC 226. I'm going to pronounce Stipe's name wrong at least 7 times in this video, so sorry in advance for that. It is what it is, and I also got this, I'm on pain meds, not really actually, long story, I'll tell you another time, and antibiotics for my tooth, but I'm super excited for this fight. I think that this is maybe one of the best UFC fights they put on in the last 2-3 years. I alluded to this in a couple videos ago that I think that UFC 226 is one of the biggest cards they've ever put on. And I think it's one of the biggest cards they've ever put on because of this main event against with Daniel Cormier and Stipe. You know, I think my favorite UFC ever is probably UFC 187, UFC 100 is up there. This isn't necessarily the best card they've ever put on, but to me, this heavyweight fight is super, super significant. We don't see this kind of matchup very often. We don't see the 2 belts versus one belt versus another division's belt. It feels maybe more frequent than it really has been because there's always people talking about it, but it actually is pretty rare for it to actually happen. You know, we had BJ Penn versus George St. Pierre, and then obviously we had very infamously Conor versus Eddie Alvarez, and I can't think of other ones. You know, you had BJ Penn versus Matt Hughes, although that I don't think that was for 2. BJ didn't have a belt at that time, and we've seen it happen before, but not like this, not like this level of heavyweight fighters happening. You know, there's a video by MMA On Point, which I highly, highly recommend that you watch, and it talks about the linear heavyweight belt. The guys at MMA On Point make really, really great videos. I remember it was about a year ago, I was thinking about starting a YouTube channel, and then they started theirs, and I thought, wow, you know, there's no point for me to make one because their videos are so good. I highly recommend that you watch them. Specifically that video on the linear heavyweight belt, or it was maybe titled something like Stipe's path to the belt or something like that, and it talks about the heavyweight UFC heavyweight championship belt, the Pride heavyweight championship belt, those merging together, and Stipe Miocic being the unified, undisputed heavyweight champion of the world with more title defenses in the UFC than any other heavyweight. Obviously, you had Fedor around, what was it, 30 fights undefeated, 20 plus fights undefeated, and you know, a lot of people consider him the greatest heavyweight of all time. But then you have Stipe, who is really making a pretty strong case to be the greatest heavyweight of all time. Then you have Daniel Cormier, who's undefeated at heavyweight, has absolutely looked like a world beater in all of his fights except for 2 against maybe the greatest fighter of all time, Jon Jones. That first fight with them was probably closer than you think it was. I watched it at a Krabby Joe's here in Ontario, and it didn't get a great watch on a good view of it, and then I rewatched it and realized how close that fight was. And Daniel Cormier had performed pretty well. And then you had the second fight, obviously, where he was knocked out. But in that first round, before getting knocked out, Daniel Cormier had actually looked really good against Jon Jones in that fight. And so to me, this heavyweight matchup of Stipe versus Cormier is as good as it gets. It's as high of level of MMA as we've ever seen. And we need to remember that this isn't necessarily just like other title fights where you had a lower divisions champion moving up to challenge a higher divisions champion. Yes, that is true. But Daniel Cormier won the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix. He's undefeated at heavyweight, and he basically only went down a division, well, one to win a belt, but also because his best friend Cain Velasquez was the champion at the time, so it didn't make sense for him to be at heavyweight. And, when I look at this fight, I have flip-flopped my opinion basically since they announced it in, I think it was February they announced it, late February, early March. And I've just changed my mind like every 5 seconds because this fight could go either way. And I know that the general community is leaning towards Stipe because he is the bigger fighter. But to me, size actually isn't going to be that big of a factor in this fight. I mean, Daniel Cormier talked about that he's going to come in at probably like 235, or he was talking about the different weights that he's been in his career, that he can get up to upwards to 240, even 250 if he's not really watching his diet. But by the time that he, cleans up his diet and keeps working out, he won't be cutting weight, and he'll come in around 228, 230, I think he said. And Stipe historically, and I had this written down, but my laptop battery died here. He historically comes in almost always within 2 pounds of the same weight, and I think it was around 248-ish, 246, 248 was how much he normally comes in. You can check that out on Wikipedia, but it's not like there's a massive size advantage here. It's not like a smaller light heavyweight moving up to a massive heavyweight. It's a guy who used to fight at heavyweight fighting another guy at heavyweight who doesn't cut weight. I mean, their size isn't really going to be that different. Now, the height and reach advantage that Stipe has is significant, but the actual weight and muscle and strength, I don't expect is going to play a big factor in this fight. So I keep changing my mind about who I thought it would be. Even though that I know that most people are leaning Stipe and the odds lean Stipe, there's been something that I've been thinking about this whole time that I'm not necessarily able to articulate, which is part of the reason why I've been putting off this video, is that I kept wanting to make the video to say, I think Stipe is going to win the fight. I think he's the smart pick, blah, blah, blah. But there's no tangible way for me to say this. It's not quantifiable. It's really just a gut instinct that I'm not a big Cormier fan. I've never been a Cormier fan, and I've doubted him in just about all of his fights. But there's this gut feeling I have that he does have what it takes, that pressure style fighting that he has will be enough to take Stipe down and basically hold him there for 5 rounds. I don't think it's necessarily that exciting of a fight. This fight is the best heavyweight fight on paper, and I believe it's probably the best heavyweight fight of all time on paper. We can debate that in the comment section. Maybe I'll explain that a little bit later, but I think this is the best heavyweight fight of all time. Definitely on paper, given the significance of the fight. But it might not play out to be that exciting because there's a good chance that Cormier is able to close the distance, be like Velcro on Stipe, take him down, and hold him down kind of similar to like what we saw against him and Anderson Silva. Now, I get that Stipe is a good wrestler, but he's not on Daniel Cormier's level. And I think that Cormier can do this. I certainly don't think that if it wasn't within the realm of possibility, he wouldn't have even taken this fight. If you look up the build-up to the Francis Ngannou versus Stipe fight, Cormier was on that card, and they said, do you want to challenge one of these guys? This is before Stipe had won. And he said, no way. I'm not fighting either one of those guys. I think it was a bit of a tell to say that if Francis won by devastating knockout, that Cormier had no desire to get in there. But he has this training partner in Cain Velasquez, who's maybe the best heavyweight alive today, in my opinion. You can make an argument for that. And that's his number one training partner. And iron sharpens iron. Their skills just help to improve each other's own skills. And if Cormier didn't know in his own mind that he had some success in the gym against Cain, he wouldn't be taking this fight. Cormier talks a lot about money, don't get me wrong, but he understands that there's more money in his legacy long term than the short term payout. Or at least I believe he thinks that way. A lot of fighters talk about money fights, but they don't realize that it's the longer term legacy that is the bigger factor here. Look at Georges St. Pierre, right? Georges St. Pierre stopped fighting altogether and was still making money hand over fist because of his legacy. So that's why he's being so selective these days about the fight he's going to take. It's not just about the fight in the moment and the paycheck you get from the pay-per-view bonus. It's about the legacy. And I think that he knows that, and he thinks he can win this fight because of the success he's probably had in the gym against Cain Velasquez. There's no way that I can necessarily articulate to you a strategy, a breakdown per se about how Cormier is going to win this fight, because all of the signs would point to Stipe's bigger. He's got better boxing. He's got enough wrestling to fend off the takedown. He's the longest defending champ in heavyweight history. All these different things could tell you why Stipe is likely to win this fight. The reality is that nobody really knows who's going to win this fight. It's just that close. But for me, all those years of doubting Cormier and being disappointed by seeing him smother guys and win because I wanted him to lose so bad, I'm just not a Cormier fan, have taught me that he has enough. I hate to say the word grind, that embrace the grind thing, but he has enough grind to close the distance, get in, and now Stipe's reach doesn't matter as much if he can get and push him up against the fence, getting close, and do that thing that Cormier does, which is just grind on guys until he gets them down. He got John Jones down. He did it against Anderson Silva. He's looked amazing against Ozdemir and Rumble Johnson, and he's got a wicked rear naked choke. Now, bringing up Rumble Johnson, it's important to point out that he does get rocked sometime in fights. You know, we saw him got rocked both times against Anthony Johnson. We saw him get knocked out by John Jones. So there is the potential that he could get knocked out through boxing. But for me, I think that he's likely learned his lesson. He understands where those gaps are. If you listen to interviews with him, he does understand what those gaps have been which have caused him to get knocked out, particularly the head kick knockout from John Jones. He knows what he did wrong there. He actually knew that it was a vulnerability before the fight. He knew about it. I think he's probably done enough to correct that and can be successful enough in the stand-up kickboxing exchange with Stipe to get inside, close the distance, and then begin to take him down. So that's my general thoughts on the fight. I mean, I gotta say that on the one hand, I really want to see this for Daniel Cormier. You know, historically, I've not been a fan of his. It's kind of like similar to what happened to me with Michael Bisping when he was getting that fight against Luke Rockhold. I wasn't a big fan of Michael Bisping, but there was something that I wanted it for him. I don't know what it is. It's that story, right? I'm a sucker for the story sometimes. And Daniel Cormier, he didn't do it in the Olympics. He didn't do it against John Jones. He's got that shadow over his head. But this is his chance to really go get his own belt that nobody could dispute was his. It's not like he has John Jones, a John Jones cloud over his head as the heavyweight title holder. So there's something about this fight that I want for Daniel Cormier, and then retire and have a good post-fight career. He's great as an analyst. He's an okay commentator. I don't love him. Everybody seems to love him. I think he's an okay commentator, but he is good as just sort of this personality for the sport. Very well spoken. I want to see this for Daniel Cormier, so I'll be rooting for him. It's the first time in ever, I think. I'll be pushing for a AKA fighter to win a fight. There's something about that camp that rubs me the wrong way. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but I want this for Daniel Cormier. I think he can do it. I can't necessarily articulate why, which I know is very bizarre because I'm making a video where you're listening to my opinion on this. But hey, I'm the one with the camera, so if you don't like it, I guess you can change the channel. I can't necessarily articulate all of the points about why I think he's going to win, but there's this gut instinct, not instinct. There's this gut feeling that every time I want to say that Stipe is going to win this fight, it's like, yeah, but Cormier did this against Frank Mir, or Cormier did this against Josh Barnett, or he did this against, I don't know, maybe Dan Henderson's not a good example, but he did this against Ozdemir and Rumble. And every time I look at Cormier fight, I see him just smothering opponents, with the exception of John Jones, who I think is potentially the greatest fighter that ever lived. And even then, first fight was very close. Second fight, he looked great standing against John. Like he was winning that fight until he wasn't. And I know that kind of sounds silly as well, but I mean, we've seen improvements out of him, and he's going to be very strong at heavyweight. I don't think he's giving up a massive size advantage. Cardio is not going to be an issue for either of them. How this fight ends up going is that if Daniel wins, it's by decision. He won't stop Stipe. I cannot see that happening. But if it goes 5 rounds, I also don't necessarily see Stipe winning a 5-round fight, but he could. He has the cardio to do it. But against Cormier, I mean, that's going to be a tall order. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the fight. We're going to find out next Saturday. That's what's so amazing about the sport, is that it's pretty hard to tell sometimes. There's a lot of unknowns, and that's why this sport is so exciting. I thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to leave me a comment to let me know how you think the fight is going to go. And if you want to check out the YouTube description, you're going to see a number of different links there for the other breakdowns I've done on the other fights. I did one on Anthony Pettis versus Michael Chiesa, did one on Francis Ngannou versus Derek Lewis, Brian Ortega versus Max Holloway, and then I did another one on the full fight card, which is me just giving my predictions. Now, I'll admit that some of those fighters I wasn't super researched for. Just been a busy couple weeks at work, two kids, construction. I mean, life is busy, but I wanted to get that video out before the card happened. You can check out all of my predictions in that video, and we'll talk after the event's over. I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss about the title picture moving forward, Daniel Cormier's legacy, and I don't know that I'm going to do a post-fight video for that one because I'm going to watch it outside with some friends, but I'll be on shortly after that, and we'll discuss it. So thank you so much for watching. Fight the good fight, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to watch this content. I'm just a fan with an opinion and a camera, but I love the sport of MMA. So if you want to see some more videos, you can take a look here on the right of this screen. And other than that, I will catch you in the next video.